Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 and the future of Total War, as well as a thank you from Creative Assembly for our support in 2024. So you have this message from the Vice President of Total War, Roger Column, thanking fans for their support in 2024. It goes into some detail, it talks about communication, transparencies, the things they've done, etc., etc. But the question is, what's in the pudding? And well, there is quite a bit over here, some very substantial stuff. The first thing is our approach to blood packs will change. They're not saying they will get rid of blood packs, but what they're saying is if a future Total War game thematically requires blood, then we will include it within the base game. So if they were to make a 40k game, which was leaked, quote unquote, earlier this year, then I imagine that a game like that would have blood. Or something like World War I game would probably have blood by default. Something like a Star Wars game, which again was also quote-unquote leaked earlier this year from various sources, that probably wouldn't have blood, partly because Star Wars blasters, lightsabers, partly because of Disney. Or it might have blood, but in very, very limited quantity. Now, I do greatly appreciate it. Ignoring the price discussion and the ratings discussion, the problem with the Blood DLC is the way animations interact. If you have it on, if you don't have it on, it always feels that without it on, like if you play the game without it on and look at animations, there's something that's going on. I think, and Mandalore Gaming made this point, that he believed in his Realms of Chaos review that there's certain animation issues that are occurring because you don't have the Blood DLC, and it took a while to get the Blood DLC. And I think that's very clear. Like, I certainly noticed it in Pharaoh Dynasties when I was playing without it on when the game came out, in Total War Pharaoh when it came out before Dynasties, when I was playing without blood, and yeah, there are some issues regards to that. I think it's clear that the animations are probably designed with blood in mind, and they're just not releasing it on day one for a number of reasons. I mean, the blood effects themselves probably are developed after the game comes out, or maybe they're developed earlier. We don't know really how that actually goes, and then they release it a couple of months later. It might be available. It might be something they could do on day one, and then people get pissed because, yeah, they're charging them extra for blood. Or it's something they're deliberately not doing before launch, finishing after launch, but the base animations, and this is my perspective on it, the base animations are probably designed with that in mind. So it would be a better experience from the animation perspective. Like, I don't care about gory blood. I turn down the blood to like 10% or even 5%, something along those lines, because I think it's ridiculous. And I certainly hope that going forward, we will have a more sensical level with regards to it. And with regards to age rating, I'm going to say this. It's always been a load of bullshit. One, you have a game like Elden Ring on the market that has a PEGI rating, and CA does care about the PEGI rating because UK company and all that. It has PEGI rating of 16. Elden Ring. The Blood DLC has 18. Total War has 16. Medieval 2, which by the way had blood spots, had 16. I think it's pretty telling. Now, the way these kind of rating boards work is that they receive a product from a company who wants them to rate them, their product, and the companies themselves give them a rating that they believe their game deserves. And if a company goes and says, okay, this is 18, the ratings board would be like, okay, whatever, right? If it's within that level. But they could also go with the 16, and clearly you can go with a PEGI 16 game if you have Elden Ring having a PEGI 16. Now, to be sure, Total War games are T14, whereas Elden Ring is not, so it's 17. And for mature, whatever, in the US, so that might be a factor. But the ratings argument was always rubbish, a load of bullshit. The reality is, Total War had some blood spots in Medieval 2, but then they had the engine change to Empire, which then probably was built without blood. And considering the mess of Empire development, if you look back at it, it wouldn't surprise me. And then they added it in Shogun 2. But it's always worth keeping in mind how they added it in Shogun 2. That was during a period where CA was doing Day 1 DLC, nickel and diming people, pay-to-win DLC, overpriced DLC. If you think CA's DLC practices are worse nowadays than they were before, no. The period of Empire, Napoleon, Shogun 2, Rome 2, and Attila was genuinely the worst period in Total War history, by far. Really badly optimized games, balanced games, horrible DLC practices, day one DLC factions, etc., etc., etc. Everything that's horrible about Total War, all the problems that you might see in the series today, all the things that people like Voland or, Pixelated Apollo complain about, all of those were created then. It has gotten better, but to argue that the experience back then was superior in any way, just gonna make that point, it was not. Like, performance-wise, run badly balanced, badly designed, so many problems. Things have gotten better, so I'm glad CA is moving away from that. Then, the Total War launcher will be removed. Of course, this does bring up the problem of modding, of course, because they want to ensure to have a mod management system in place before doing so that's going to be a big question mark. But they are actively working on it. I'm not sure if that's really a big problem with the game. I personally don't have really a big issue with the launcher, but what do I know, right? Apparently some people do, and apparently CA does themselves. With regards to stuff like that, though, one of the things I would ask CA at this point, could you remove the nouveau from their games? Or rather, I would ask them first off, what is the performance impact of the nouveau, specifically loading times? Because I suspect one of the reasons we have loading time issues, especially going in battles, going outside of battles, is probably because of the nouveau, because of the way that works. And it's also the autosaving. If you play Legendary Iron Man, you might notice a performance drop when the game is autosaving. That's not just because of the autosaving, though obviously that plays a role. It is because of the nouveau. Like, I've seen it in other games. So I would be curious to see how Total War runs with and without the nouveau. And I would like to see that removed, because, Total War uses the nouveau. For what it is worth, I do have to say that compared to, say, Hogwarts Legacy, Jedi Survivor, all that, it does seem that however CA has included the nouveau in their games, it does seem that the performance impact is fairly low overall compared to those games. Like, if you didn't know it had the nouveau, you may not necessarily notice. You might just think, oh, it's got loading times of X, Y, and Z. But I wonder if those loading times are related to the nouveau or if the performance impact is that minimal. Like, that's what I would ask them. Like, really, the nouveau is a piece of crap anyway. So, it would be nice to get rid of it. Might help somewhat. Factions will no longer be an early adopter bonus. Thank fuck for that. Day 1 DLC factions were always terrible. The reason is that they were not really made with a game budget, from my understanding. They were made with a marketing budget. And they were never really supported properly or designed properly from the beginning. That's why Ogres ended up so bad. That's why Chaos Warriors ended up so badly. That's why we had so many issues with Norseco. Though, to be clear, Norseco was designed for Warhammer 1, not Warhammer 2. It was difficult to implement them on Warhammer 2. It was actually quite fine for Warhammer 1 as a faction, but it was a bit of a problem in Warhammer 2. But Ogres and just basically every single Day 1 DLC faction that CA has ever added. Yes, even looking at the Greek city-states in Rome 2, or the factions in Shogun 2, they were, because that's where it started. People treat Shogun 2 as a precious gem. I'm going to say Shogun 2, might have done some things very well. I agree. I think it has some of the best siege battles in the series, but I'm going to say, all right, Shogun 2 had some of the worst business practices in the series as a whole. Don't even get me started on how broken the multiplayer was over there. I mean, multiplayer is still broken, but pretty bad over there. Then, Shadows of Change will offer individual purchase options alongside updates to its featured races. So we're working on a plan for next year, which brings key campaign changes to Kislev content alongside some smaller changes, improvements for Siege and Cafe. Would be nice to get some fixes, some bug fixes for the Changeling campaign, some improvements to Kairos' campaign, the economy, etc. Grand Cafe really could use a better climate situation and just a longer-term campaign, and also a freaking replenishment hero. That would be very welcome. Honestly, just seriously, screw the training that we have right now, or just give us some way of getting replenishment. Would be really, really needed. Would be very helpful in that situation. But honestly, I think the bigger problem with Grand Cafe is you just have a campaign that's kind of over regardless of which Legendary Lord is by turn 20 because you run out of territory to conquer. And that's kind of one of the problems that ruins Grand Cafe. It's not a bad race. And the compass, screw the compass. It's a bad system, broken system. Some updates to research could be improved. But don't get me wrong on this. Let me be clear. Kislev needs a far more. Kislev needs, honestly, a nerf to some of the bullshit you can do. with it, and they need a better economy, they need better provinces, they need a terrain change potentially. Like, yes, they changed some of the terrain, but like, I would certainly incorporate the cities of Kislev into bigger provinces. Like, Old World did that, makes them more useful. I would add the caravans building as a baseline in the big Kislev cities, because they're not worth it economically without it. So, like, Old World, just put those cities into proper provinces and makes them far more useful. Change the landmarks, change the situation, improve the campaigns, all of them, literally. Ostankya's system, Boris's campaign, Catherine's campaign, Kostaltin's campaign. I'll make a whole video on Kislev. I made several already. But yeah, Kislev does need a lot more changes than Grand Cafe, from my point of view. As for Siege, I personally would burn the entire Changeling campaign to on the Pyre, but with Kairos I think could work better. If he had genuinely, of all the characters the game could use a teleport mechanic, it would be Kairos. I just think he needs a better way of handling economy as opposed to like the modifiers that we currently have. Like, just bring him more in line with like Khorne, really, or even Nurgle. Bring Kairos more in line with that. That would really, really help things out. I feel like that's kind of the irritating aspect. Like, you look at Kislev needs a significant overhaul of a lot of freaking systems. Siege needs certain changes that even modders could do. Like, don't get me wrong, someone without modding experience can do a lot to really improve the Kislev campaign situation, but there's still a lot of inherent issues with Kislev that does require CA to look at those. So yeah, I'm really happy about this. I'm really happy with what CA has decided to do, and I think I'll finish it with this particular note. Because last year in particular, there were a lot of us that were highlighting these issues. And to be clear, there are people out there who go way too far, right? You know, like Pixelate Apollo was full of shit in his videos. Like, those, like, what really irritated me about his videos, like those people who just consume and don't ask questions. It's like, the Total War Warhammer community has done far more to push Total War in a positive direction than the classic community has ever done. I'm not going to go on details, but suffice to say, I was active on Total War Center. I remember what people were saying back then and what the fanboys were saying. So the argument that the fanboys are to blame for it's like, no, the fanboys burnt CA at the pyre for SOC. Just to be clear, in a way that, for those of us that have played this series for almost 2 decades, or if not more, it would have been unimaginable back in the days of Empire, Napoleon, Rome 2, Attila, etc. For all the criticism CA got back then. But what has happened with Warhammer 3 in particular, and even Warhammer 2, you gotta remember, CA was heavily criticized back then in the days of Warhammer 2. People may want to talk about like, oh, Warhammer 2 was the glory days. People want to ignore all the criticism CA got. So it did happen. It started in Warhammer 2, continued in Warhammer 3, was certainly exacerbated by the situation, which has a change, hyenas, etc., and Pharaoh. So we're in a much better situation. The fans held CA's feet to the fire. This is why we're getting this. And so this should be just a wake-up call to some people who think like, oh, you're just criticizing to be negative. And no, people who criticize give a shit. Like, if you don't care about something, if you really hate something and you don't care about it, you just won't play it. If you do care about something, you'll criticize in the hope that things will get better. Things have gotten better. There are still issues. There are still improvements. CA themselves acknowledges that. Always have cautious optimism. Like, you know, it's always a case. You got to understand. Trust takes time to build. Very easy to destroy. Takes a long time to build. CA certainly ruined a lot of trust that the community had in them with a lot of things they did in Warhammer 3. Because, like, CA had been building trust by the end of Warhammer 2. And then that went down the drain with Warhammer 3 in a lot of ways. It did get better. Throne's Decay was a nice positive step. Ohm's Destruction, some issues, but still, you know, it is a much better DLC than a lot of people may give it credit for. And then this post in particular is a really nice way to end this year. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.